governor's office is not involved in that lunch at all, right? So I think that's really important to distinguish.
We certainly tried to keep as much money in the pockets of residents of Rhode Island because of inflation issues.
My understanding is the project is going to be completed.
Not pleased with how they spent the money. Some of the money hasn't been spent, and I think we need the new leadership down there.
Holding the powerful accountable from Washington, D.C. to right here in southern New England. This is 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti.
Hi, everybody. Quite the list of topics. A controversial lunch with a lobbyist, the budget, the Tidewater Stadium deal, and reorganizing RIPTA. Just some of the topics for our Reporters Roundtable on 10 News Conference. Joining me today, the I-Team's Allison Bologna, Brian Crandall, and Tamara Sakarzak. Welcome to all of you. We all know each other, so we're comfortable. Yeah. All right, let's get started. We'll get to all of those stories, but first, the one I think we should talk about is the alleged scratching of a car in the Garden City parking lot with a key in hand. Senator Miller is accused of doing that, Senator Josh Miller. I broke the story on Friday, but it's got legs. ABC, NBC, CNN, the New York Post, the New York Times. This is the kind of story that percolates, Allison.
Well, it's also, we got body camera video, right?
Right.
Two of him saying, I don't know, not my problem. But
Yep.
it is. It's definitely his problem, and it's making national headlines at this point.
Yeah.
Not the way we want to be known in Rhode Island, but yet again, right?
No, and I think the denial of doing it, and then later on when
Right.
confronted by the police, changing the story. And again, as Allison said, the Cranston police releasing the body camera video, which they've had a number of incidents recently with politicians where they've released officer body camera video that's kind of told more of the story.
Yeah, what struck me too is when he said immediately to the police, I'm a state senator. That was one of the first things that came out of his mouth after police approached him about it.
Yeah, and then, well, he told the story changed, and it sounded like he admitted to what he had done at the end, at the officers, as the officers recounted. Well, why did you scratch his car? Well, he threatened me.
Right, he said there were gun nuts who were chasing him,
Yeah.
because he's a state senator, but, and it's just fodder for people on the other side who are saying, like, you have it out for us because you keyed the car because he had a bumper sticker on it that said
And it goes down
Biden sucks.
political lines, yeah.
The Biden thing. All right, quick poll. Does he resign over it, Tammy?
I mean, I think it's up to his constituents ultimately.
Oh, we
but
know
if
that
they
quick
call
poll,
on him
yes
to,
or no. We're not the politicians.
I would say yes. You keyed somebody's car, you committed a crime.
Yes, I say no, he's going to ride it out because others have done the same thing, maybe worse. Allison, what do you say?
Same, and he's got some momentum at the State House with a couple of bills that people like.
My guess is he stays, and other lawmakers have had legal problems as well. We can look at the Senate
That's very
president
true.
years and years ago.
Yeah, true, but these things tend to stick with you because I know the lawmakers and the stories, and it sticks with you. You're not going to shake the story even though you
Everybody
may keep your
remembers,
seat. Yeah.
even though you stick around.
You're right. All right, let's keep going now. You know what they're going to remember about Governor McKee is this crazy story with the Philadelphia developers and the lunch and the executives he sent down there, and then his own problems with the lunch. A lot of people are eating lunch over here on other people's dimes.
It's pretty salacious, too.
Yep.
It's over the top with Michelin star restaurants. It's just a lot. It's embarrassing to the state of Rhode Island, and there's a record of it in emails, and there's witnesses to it, too. So it's a matter of saying what happened and why hasn't anything or anybody been held accountable
And now it's just
yet.
something that the same company and situation has so many prongs to it, where you have this lunch that goes back to January, the visit by the two high-ranking state officials in March, and now it's all coming out in May and June. And now the Rhode Island Republican Party has filed an ethics complaint against the governor here at the end of the week in
all over
regard
a lot
to that
of money
lunch.
of an empty building, too.
Right, and that has the new ethics complaint from the Republican Party is over McKee's lunch with lobbyist Jeff Britt and the Scout executives back in January, and who paid for the lunch and how come it wasn't reimbursed and whatnot.
Just a quick background. Two former state executives go to Philadelphia, talk to the developers of the Cranston Street Armory. They allegedly misbehave, one more than the other. It gets back to the governor. He apologizes, but then he gets embroiled in this whole thing of his own, Tammy, because he had lunch at the Capitol Grill.
And I believe his story changed on that, right, Brian? He said something initially, and then he kind of...
Well, his version, Governor McKee's version with lobbyist Jeff Britt's version, there was a little bit of a discrepancy there. The lunch predates the visit by the two high-ranking officials by a couple of months, but it surfaced as part of the reporting. I think Kathy Gregg at the Providence Journal had it first when she talked to the Scout executives who were involved, because they were the same ones, the same executives who complained about the behavior by the state officials on their visit in March were the ones who had lunch with Governor McKee back in January. It was called a campaign event, a fundraiser. Each of those executives on that same day, according to campaign finance records, donated $500 to McKee's campaign. right? They all have lunch.
Yeah.
McKee says he has to leave early. McKee's campaign says their treasurer, who was also at the lunch, went to the bathroom when the bill came. Lobbyist Jeff Britt picks up the tab. It's supposed to be reimbursed.
To me on occasion. All of a sudden, they're not there.
They're not there to pick up
They leave you with the bill?
Yeah.
But like Allison said, it just looks bad for Rhode Island as a state in general.
All right.
Well, Philadelphia was like, what?
Wait, it was in their front. It was the front page of Philadelphia Inquirer.
Right.
So it did embarrass us. Those two guys are gone. That whole deal could prove more worrisome for the governor, I think, in terms of the attorney general investigating, rather than this piddly little ethics investigation on the lunch. Even if they get him on the lunch, it's a piddly little fine. He can't give back the lunch. But the attorney general is investigating this in a larger way, and the AG is no friend of the governor's.
Not anymore.
And that has played out awfully publicly.
Yes.
In
Twitter and otherwise.
Yeah.
And it seems like on Twitter, every time Governor McKee says something, the Attorney General always has a response that kind of counteracts exactly what he just said, whether we're talking about the cold case unit or
which
a
he
different
just got
topic.
funding for, despite their not agreeing on everything. But yes, I mean, everybody thinks Peter Nerona's going to run, right, at some point.
Right.
He says no. I mean, he answers no to that all the time, but he sounds like he's running. Now, I had him on 10 News Conference last week. Do you know, he hasn't spoken to the governor since April of last year. It's a long time.
Which has to be unusual for, an attorney general and the governor in any state.
Well, there's
not
been a
speak
number
for
of
that long.
investigations now, and
Well,
I think that
been.
Tony Silva and the ILO, and now there was a kind of dispute over. Governor McKee says he asked the state police to look into the Philadelphia trip back a couple months ago, and Nerona tweets out, "Well, I didn't hear that."
Let me ask you this: we've all spoken to the governor. You think he has a thin skin? Because that's what I'm hearing from some people in the media. He's on the outs with a lot of reporters. If you catch up with him, he'll answer a question. But is he thin-skinned?
I think he does get upset, and you can see him bristle at some of the questions.
Yes.
So we just asked him again about the lunch again on Wednesday.
He responded to you.
Yeah, and he responds, and he says it. But sometimes you can tell
he responds, but he also asks you, where were you on that date?
Yeah,
so he did. He got defensive.
Last week when we asked him about the lunch on January 19th, you were right, Tammy.
Yeah.
One of his responses was, do you remember what you were doing on January 19th?
As if it matters where Brian Crandall was on that day.
Well, my wife told me where I was. I was in Naples, Florida. I got it wrong at first on the radio, but then she corrected me. This is Peter Nerone with me last week on. He doesn't speak to the governor. That's it.
We are now working with the state police to just see what this is. This could be sort of minor. There's no minor ethics issue, but they may not be things that my office would address and are best addressed by the Ethics Commission, but I'm not in a position to say that affirmatively, definitively right now.
You said that it was news to you to find out the state police were investigating, that the governor had referred that email to the state police. You were not happy about that.
We're better when we're brought in early. That didn't happen here. Look, I cast no blame on the state police or on anybody else, but we're on the same page now, and we'll get to the right place.
So you don't think Colonel Weaver owed you a phone call?
Would I have preferred that to happen? Sure. But we're on the same page now.
No, Colonel Weaver with the state police, we haven't heard from him since he's been elevated to that post.
Right.
He keeps a low profile.
Very low profile.
It's a little different from O'Donnell.
The lowest of the profiles of the state police. Reporters Roundtable, a lot of stories to get to. Each reporter with me has one they want to talk about. Let's begin with you, Tammy Sakarczyk. Taxes and tolls. On the tolls, it has to do with truck tolls. We're still fighting that case.
Yeah, so the appeal is actually really just getting started. The response to the trucking industry's brief is due today to the appeals court, and from there oral arguments will be scheduled, so we'll actually see whether they win this or not. But I mean, from everything I've heard from attorneys, they have no shot of winning so far. We've already spent $8.4 million on this as taxpayers, another $375,000 this year, so you can expect that amount to go up.
And that
We're expecting
enrages
at least $2 million.
Rhode Islanders.
It does, because I mean, attorneys are saying we can't win this, and we're saying, well, let's go ahead and do it anyways.
Do you think Raimondo's paying attention to this?
I think she's trying to ignore it and forget about it because she's down there with a new life.
She's saying it's not my problem anymore.
Right.
She's all done.
And then the other question is, what do you do with the funding that was supposed to come from the tolls to pay for the road repairs? Now, in the end, they say that's not necessarily a huge amount of the money, but it's
That
still
was
a
the whole
factor.
point of bringing the tolls in. So
that was the
yeah.
argument. We're going to use that to pay for road works, which is all this major construction that we're still doing.
Yeah, incidentally, Judge Smith, who put the decision on roadworks, says he wants to take senior status in 2025, and that will allow for a rare opening on the district court in Providence. So a little footnote there. Allison, you want to talk hospitals, particularly state-run hospitals.
Follow this. BHDDH, Buddha, whatever you want to call it. It's big. I sat down with now Secretary Richard Shurast. He was in charge of BHDDH, which is basically like the healthcare system. It all came through an Ask Allison that came in about the psychiatric hospital, Slater Hospital. He has since restructured it as the director so that we're getting more federal dollars, better care, better morale of the staff. But now he's going one step further. So going back to Governor McKee, they go way back.
Yeah.
He elevated him, promoted him to secretary. So now he oversees DCYF, Department of Health, in addition to the hospitals. And he's thinking about going back to separating out hospitals, follow, from the Department of Behavioral Health care. So we're talking about folks with intellectual developmental disabilities being in one side of the government and then the other side being hospitals separated out. But he's in charge of $3.5 billion. That's roughly a quarter of our state budget. It's a big position. He's very well respected, and he wants to kind of shake things up, break things out, and do a better job.
Yeah, those are the state hospitals. And then a couple of weeks ago, I had the new heads of Lifespan and Care New England. There's a broom sweeping clean with regard to hospitals in this state. Those are two new guys taking over. All right, let's go to you,
But no
Brian.
more mergers, what we're hearing.
Well, they said
Supposedly. We'll see.
not in the immediate future.
Right,
Maybe
right.
someday.
And the Attorney General's against it, so.
All right, Brian, you've been covering the CD1. Have you spoken to all 27 people thus far?
What are we up to, 19?
I haven't. There's two I think that I haven't spoken to yet. Or one I've.
Well, they're very
we
upset
went back
that you
and forth.
haven't included them.
Well, no, they haven't gotten back to me. But right, we're up to like 16, 18 people now, right? And
Well, it depends which ones are real.
yeah, and the declaration period is Thursday and Friday, and so we'll see what happens. But yeah, out of the 16, 18 people, it's like I would think there's a handful of legitimate contenders here. It's starting to heat up a little bit. Endorsements are coming in. Some of them are going back and forth. You've got Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos, Aaron Regenberg, Sandra Cano, Gabe Amo, that I would probably put in the top tier. And and the progressives are going after Regenberg, who, by all accounts, we would call it progressive, but that kind of shows the infighting within the Democratic Party and kind of going over that more liberal side of the party and trying to win that vote.
This is the race to replace Congressman Cicilline. Boy, he opened up the floodgates when he left. There's we don't know. It's 17 or 18. One drops out, another
Democrats
one jumps in.
as of
Correct?
today.
Are there two Republicans? We heard
think
there were
one.
actual
One
Republicans.
Republican.
One. There was a
fake, one
couple
real,
of people whose names went in that we
Right.
reported on who didn't seem
A
to actually
phantom.
be
There's
real
a phantom,
people.
and there's a real
Yeah.
person.
And that
Okay.
apparently happens.
There's no real front runner, though. Is that fair to say?
Well, according
the
to Sabina
Lieutenant Governor
Her internal
Matos,
polls.
her poll says she's the front
Well,
runner.
of course, yeah.
And again, a front runner in this race, if you get 20%, there's so
Right, when
much
you have this many
splitting of the
candidates.
vote. And again, in CD1, there's mostly Democratic candidates. It's a heavily Democratic district. So the primary, by conventional wisdom, could settle a lot of things, and that's in September.
But we were thinking maybe Nellie Gorbea was going to jump back in,
No, she
Helena
didn't.
Folks, and none of that. So it's kind of interesting that it shook out the way it did.
There's a lot of people running. I tend to believe that poll probably Sabina Matos probably is the front
Name
runner, at least by
recognition.
name recognition, and Regenberg is probably number two. Now, Regenberg had a misstep over the weekend, according to the fellow
Oh,
people
the
running
Newport
against him.
story.
Now, he's Mr. Progressive, Mr. Man of the People, he's defund the police, he's all these things, and he held a fundraiser at Bois d'Or, which is a magnificent Newport mansion, with the black and white marble when you walk in, and the furniture, and the Trompe-l'oeil murals, famous in the dining room. Do you think that was a misstep on his part?
I mean, we've seen politicians have insanely expensive fundraisers across the aisle. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care what you represent. When it comes to fundraising for your campaign, people dish out the money. So they completely go against everything they say, and they spend all of this money to have these lavish fundraisers every year.
And I would think most of the top-end candidates are getting money from high-end places. But as I was mentioning with Regenberg, is that the other progressives in the race were angry at him for getting in the race. They claim, Cynthia Mendez, who ran for lieutenant governor, was going after him a couple months ago, but claiming it's a white male privilege. Why are you getting in when there's progressive women of color who are already in the race? And so I think he's been a target for that wing.
Well, listen, he is Mr. Tax the Rich. This is his
Anti-big
area.
corporations.
And tax the corporations, and the little guy doesn't get a fair break, and you hold a fundraiser in the Newport mansion. He deserves the beating he's getting. Now, whether it was a misstep, incidentally, plenty of Democrats, including all the members of our congressional delegation, hold fundraisers in Palm Beach and other
yeah.
swanky places, but they don't knock the rich for having the mansion in Palm Beach. He did, and now he's going to get a beating for it.
And we'll see how long, again, some of this stuff plays. It's the end of June.
Yep.
We've got a summer here,
Will
before Labor Day weekend and the primary. So we'll see how memories kind of shake out over the next couple of months in a race that, again, I don't know if a lot of the general public is really paying attention to at this point.
So? Well, maybe because I live in Pawtucket, everybody's talking about CD1, but it was interesting too that Don Grebian was not going to run. There was a lot of buzz.
Speaker Shikarchi, Mayor Rivera.
That I think is the story. It's like who decided
just about
not to
everybody's
get
name
in.
was in there at the beginning.
Totally.
To continue with our Reporters Roundtable, we just asked, we all own a house in different communities. Tammy, you did a story on property reevaluations are going to go up because the value of the house has increased, and that generally means taxes go up. Square the two?
So, I mean, it depends on how much the community cuts the tax rate. So I spoke to Warwick and East Providence this time, and yeah, most people did see at least a couple $100 added to their annual tax bill, but it really depends. South Kingstown last year moved forward with the revaluations when I think 5 cities and towns paused it, and they saw it go up even higher in some cases. I remember I spoke to trailer owners. Theirs went up like 100%, which is insanity to think about what that is going to do to your tax bill, because no matter what the rate is, no matter how much you cut it, that's going to have a significant impact.
So the mill rate, the per thousand, the assessed value, your house is worth more, but then they cut the tax rate, so it only amounts in several communities to a couple of $100.
Well, yeah, the home values are skyrocketing. Everybody,
Just today,
look at how much you can get for your house.
Median price?
Problem is, what do you buy?
Looking online at houses is insane. I found a house in North Situate that's burnt down, basically. Part of it is in shambles, and it's being sold for $400,000.
Yeah.
So
my neighborhood alone, home values have gone up, tripled.
Yeah.
Tripled in just a couple of years. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But then you sell, and then what do you get, right?
Right,
So
you get
that's
your
where
money.
everybody is.
Inventory is tight. I think there's only like 700 homes for sale in
interest
all
rates
of
are up.
Rhode Island. Interest rates went up, but if your house is desirable, you're still going to get a customer.
You are.
Somebody from out of state will
And
pay
you're
whatever
going to
you're
get
asking.
a customer fast.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to go from housing to the homeless. The homeless have been it's in the news a lot this year. There's an encampment in next to the Da Vinci Center. I think we all know about it. It's been there for months and months, and yet these poor people at the Da Vinci Center, which is an organization that helps people, can't get any help. It's falling on deaf ears. The mayor says, well, it's up to the state. Peter Alvidi at DOT says, well, then move them out and I'll clean it up. And there seems to be no action on the part of Secretary Pryor, who's the housing czar now, or the governor. So I don't know what more to say. There's only so much the news media can do. Beat the drum.
I know.
It's not up to us.
Right, and just remember, it was a huge story going back to December with the encampment outside the State House and what to do, and then finally moving them to the Armory after telling them they had to leave. And
then the Armory's back in the news with Patton.
Everything comes full circle.
I know.
All right, everything does come full circle, including that soccer stadium.
Well, and talking about interest rates
in Pawtucket.
Well, and it goes back to interest rates and the cost of buying things and doing business. It's remember the issue over whether or not they're actually going to go forward with the construction went back a couple months ago when the city of Pawtucket held back on issuing the public bonds, the taxpayer end of the financing, because the interest rates were so high. And then we find out that now the developer is scaling back or pulling back on some of the construction. At least for a while, because again, there's the financing issue and the cost of doing business, and they'll claim that it's the cost of any of these big projects, and it's come up with the Superman project as well.
The problem is the scale of Tidewater is so big. We're not talking like $1 million over budget. We're talking 5, 6.
My question though with all of this is, when we approved all of these projects, the ones that have been put on pause or delayed in Rhode Island, this was the past 2 years or so, we knew interest rates were going to go up. We knew the market was shaky.
Even before that.
And there was talk of a potential recession.
It was an election year.
Yeah.
Politicians tend
remember,
to talk a good game in election
Valley.
year.
And you heard it, right? You played the clip at the very beginning of the show where Governor McKee said it's going to get done. That was in reference to the soccer stadium. So the soccer team, Rhode Island FC, came out and said they're going to play their first year next year at Bryant, because they know the stadium's not going to be ready. But it started construction, so.
Well, the site is cleaned up. I go by it a lot. But also, we have a new Commerce Secretary. Stefan moves to Housing. We have Liz Tanner now in Commerce. She gets along great with Mayor Grebian. So we'll see. And this is big for the governor because it's a Blackstone Valley.
She says the private developer, found his money.
Fortuitous raised
so
private funding.
the private developer's got his $10 million, whatever he needed to keep going. But even as we say this, the equipment's pulling out. They moved the trucks out. They stopped work over there. All right. Let's keep going to Providence. That's a city we all spend time in.
We forgot about McCoy's going.
Oh, all right. Well, while we're in Pawtucket, squeeze in the cord. Go ahead.
Final fireworks, huh?
Right.
It's over. So the Blue Sox are going strong, and
that's what
McCoy's
started
done.
it all, right?
That's what started the whole thing at the
Paw Sox move out
Tidewater.
because of a reluctance to put in the state capitol,
We didn't
which
talk
in the
Tidewater
end,
before
I mean,
Paw
we all go
Sox.
back to this. Looking back at it now, would it have been a better
would have been
deal
a
at the
cheaper
time?
deal.
Right?
Rhode Island would
Seriously.
not have spent anywhere near as much money in that deal than what Worcester and the state of Massachusetts ended up putting in. Right now, they
Right.
try to replace it with a soccer stadium, and again, it was all this reluctance to put in the taxpayer money in the wake of 38 studios. Now, they
Right.
claim with Tidewater is that the state money is all on the back end. Like, you've got to be done
It's a
before you get
reimbursable, it's tax
you get
credits,
any of
you
your
got to
money.
spend the money before you get it, but it costs more to
Right.
borrow the money too.
When is the finale from McCoy?
It
They're
is
gonna have
Monday,
fireworks?
right?
Monday.
And then folks are able to basically take memorabilia
Yeah.
from there as
Okay.
well, and that might be the site of a new high school.
We only have 90 seconds left. Let's go to Providence. By the way, Mayor Smiley invites us all to his fireworks at
Okay.
India Point, July 2nd. He says it's going to be a good time. Mayor Smiley, there's a new sheriff in town. Take 20 seconds. Give me the last word on Mayor Smiley. He's not taking any guff from anybody.
Well, and
he
he's-
said, I'm the mayor, and now that's it.
Right, he caught some flack over making changes to PBD Fest, you know,
Yes.
trying to, what he says, make it more family friendly with less alcohol and whatnot. And we were just talking, which one is better? Do you let people drink on the streets and have more fun, or do you say, like, we need to scale back a little bit and
I say
have
it's a
families?
compromise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been to PBD Fest?
You know, I haven't been, but I've seen enough Instagram videos pop up from
Okay.
PBD Fest where if you look at it, you know, things do get messy
What
down
I-
there. And they're still saying you can drink, just you're also supporting
Yeah.
restaurants
They're
while
also
you drink.
changing where it is. They're moving it from right downtown over to the river. But also, he's unapologetic, is he
No,
not?
he's not.
He's like, this is the deal, this is the rule, we're enforcing it along with
Done.
parks too.
I've got to enforce the time limit. That's it. We're out of time. The mayor says the parks close at 9 o'clock, and no change in that. PBD Fest, it's being moved. No change in that. If you want to have a block party, get a permit. All right. To be continued. Thanks to all of you for coming in.